Wandile Sihlobo van die landbousektor Agbiz bespreek vanoggend 'n paar ekonomiese kwessies met betrekking tot die landbousektor. So, good morning, Mr. Sihlobo. It's been some time.
Good morning, Elsa and the viewers. Thanks for having me on.
Now, I would like to start with the grain market, Wandile, please. I mean, the profit margins have been tightened this year, and farmers need to work to ensure higher yields in order to thrive.
Yeah, I think, Elsa, that is actually becoming a reality when we look towards the 2021-22 production season, which is the one that will be starting in October. But looking back, I think it has been a relatively better year in a sense that commodity prices have been trading at relatively good levels, over 3,000 for a long period, and also in a year where we have had really the second biggest grains harvest in history. You think about maize, for example, we're having a harvest that is just notches over 16.3 million tons, second biggest in history. And in soybeans, for example, where we are around about 1.9 million tons, that's the biggest in history. So it has been a relatively better period, but going forward towards the 2021-22, it will really be the story that you have described, whereby profit margins will be squeezed. And I guess then the way to get through that will really be ensuring that we have better yields. And I think through better yields, we could be able then to be in a better place. And the thing that is causing the squeeze in those profit margins is really also the higher input costs. Looking at the fertilizer prices, agrochemicals prices, they are all over 60% up on a year-on-year basis because of disruptions in the shipping lines and to an extent also the supply constraints.
Now, I would also like us to refer to the recent reports regarding good harvests that led to a 9% increase in farm jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. The primary agricultural jobs increased in the second quarter of this year. We obviously coming from a period where we had seen jobs in the first quarter tanking by roughly around about 8% on a quarter-on-quarter basis. And in the second quarter, the improvement reflects largely the conditions that we are seeing on the ground, in a sense that the second quarter of each year is relatively a busy period for agriculture. If you think about those that in horticulture, fruits and vegetables, that's a harvesting period, specifically for some of the larger fruits like citrus, and to an extent also you do see tail ends of activity within the deciduous fruits. So there was a bit of a seasonal employment that got created there. But also in the grains space, it's a harvesting period. Activity is relatively higher in the second quarter compared, for example, with the first quarter, which is why we saw that improvement in the job. So it's a period of a higher activity and in a year of abundant harvest, and that is giving us this combination. But obviously, Elsa, this is not a picture that is uniform across. There's still provinces that we do see experiencing challenges, such as the Western Capes, but particularly the wine industry, because of all of the wine bans that were, alcohol bans that were in place, that have had really tough financial conditions for that industry. But overall, the improvement in the jobs correlates with what we are seeing in an overall broad agricultural output and the activity of the second quarter.
Wandile, what is your prediction regarding the coming 2021-22 season that will probably be a continuation of favorable weather conditions and good agricultural operations in South Africa?
Yeah, we're looking at the 2021-22 production season that begins in October with some bit of optimism from our side. We do hear from our colleagues in the weather industry, that in the weather sector, that there will be a possibility of a weak La Nina. So we take that as one of the important factors in our thinking about the next season, as already signaling that it will be a relatively better one. And the second of that, obviously, is the strong tractor sales that we continue to see. I mean, if you just look even in our August numbers, the tractor sales were up over 30% on a year-on-year basis. And we've been seeing tractor sales since mid-2020 rising on a month-by-month by double-digit when you compare on a year-on-year basis. To us, that means that the farmers, yes, they're benefiting from the financial resources of the previous season, season and they are replacing a lot of machinery, but it also signals that there is some bit of optimism about the next season. And in addition to that, I mean, we do see commodity prices softening from levels that we were in at the start of this year, but not really notable to the extent that they will be back to levels we've seen in 2019, 2018. Commodity prices will remain relatively higher. So a combination of these three factors, relatively higher commodity prices, increased machinery sales, favorable weather conditions, that tells us that we could see planting of summer crops remaining at the levels that we are in. But all of this is favorable not only for the grains industry, but the same is true for horticulture industry, which will also be benefiting from our favorable rainfalls that we see in the coming season.
And South Africa's agri-exports so far?
I mean, the South Africa's agricultural sector, Elsa, you will remember that it is export-oriented in a sense that we are exporting about half of what we produce. If you look back into 2020, for example, that was the second biggest agricultural export year in history, around about $10.2 billion. Already this year, we are seeing that the exports are solid. In the first quarter, for example, in the first half of this year, first 6 months, we saw exports reaching $6.1 billion. That was up by around about over 30% on a year-on-year basis. And obviously, there's a base effect issue in a sense that the first quarter of last year was affected partly by COVID, but it also just speaks to the rigorous season that I was talking about to say we had a robust harvest. So we are looking that the exports will also be performing relatively well this year, and we think that they might surpass the 2020 levels. We will obviously for the third quarter see that the numbers might be muted following the disruptions on the IT, cyber issues at Transnet, and also some of the unrest that happened in Natal. And we do think that those will weigh on the third quarter numbers. But overall for the year, we are positive in as far as the export front in the South Africa's agricultural space.
Are there any other challenges regarding the agricultural sector at this stage?
I mean, there's always, Elsa, a number of challenges that we grapple with. And starting from the very same export activity space, one of the big issues in South Africa is logistics. And we write about this earlier this week in some of our media articles about the story of the logistics that the sector is facing. Either it's delays, it's congestion. Those are some of the important things. And also higher costs onto that. And these are logistical challenges at the ports, but also we do see that increasingly inland, there are some logistical challenges. And this, it's a cross-cutting issue. The crime in Transnet infrastructure is a big thing that is progressively increasing the cost of doing business, but also the need for modernization of the infrastructure is a big thing. And beyond that, I mean, there are long-term challenges. For example, the needs for water infrastructure, for expansion of agriculture, as well as modernization of the regulations within the water sector, and the cross-cutting issues around the land needs and the land policy governance. Those are issues that remain in the sector. And I think that the policymakers are beginning to think and listen about that. And we do see some of those being addressed in the agricultural master plan, which I think all stakeholders in agriculture should participate in that process, because it begins to think about how do we boost inclusive growth in a more collaborative manner between government and business. And from an Agbiz side, it's a platform as well as an initiative that we are fairly part of and trying to work hard with some of our colleagues in ensuring that there is inclusive growth in the sector.
Are there any opportunities that we can look forward to in future?
I mean, the opportunities that we can look forward to as we go forward is obviously saying, will the government release some of the land that is on its balance sheet? If the answer there is yes, and also there are movements in as far as the regulations such as Act 36 for those that are involved in agrochemicals and to the livestock industry, those could be some of the, I would say, prerequisites that would excite people and also ensure that ease of doing business is improved within the agricultural sector. And I think those would be some of the things. And obviously, there's stories around blended finance, which we are pretty much also participating in. That begins to be one also of the instruments that will assist, especially for the new entrant farmers that will be coming in the sector. But in as far as the exciting areas of expansion in agriculture, we are looking at the Eastern Cape, particularly that belt over the Transkei area into Natal, Limpopo, and parts of the southern parts of Mpumalanga as some of the next frontiers for expansion in agricultural activity. And I would say those are exciting, but there's a lot to be done from infrastructure side into the regulatory issues and the land governance issues that over the years, we hope that South Africans as a collective will be able to confront those challenges for the good of the sector and the country.
Wandile, we've got about a minute left. So I would just like to, conclude and ask you, in essence, any short-term or long-term predictions that you would like to point out?
I think long-term prediction is that there is potential in agriculture in South Africa, and we will likely be at the positive growth trajectory going into 2030. But a lot will need to be done to achieve that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Wandile, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And I hope to, be speaking to you in the very nearby future again.
Thank you.
Dit was dan Wandile Sihlobo van Agbiz.